A young woman lay motionless on the ground near Buckingham Palace's famous royal guard, her body crumpled just feet away from the stoic soldier who stood frozen in place, bound by centuries of unwavering protocol. The crowd watched in shocked silence as precious seconds ticked by, no one daring to approach the sacred space between civilian and guard. But amidst the tension, an unexpected hero emerged, Hollywood star Keanu Reeves, who had been quietly observing the palace ceremony moments before. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, breaking the invisible barrier that had held others back. The guard's eyes flickered with internal conflict as the actor crossed the forbidden line, protocol warring with basic human instinct. What happened in the next few moments would not only save a life, but challenge traditions dating back hundreds of years. Before we continue this incredible story, stay with us to discover how one man's split-second decision forced the British monarchy to re-examine rules written in stone. Tomorrow, we'll share another remarkable tale of courage that changed lives forever. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Aria Mitchell's small London apartment as she carefully packed her bag for what she hoped would be an unforgettable day. A 23-year-old history student at King's College, Aria had spent countless hours studying the traditions of the British monarchy, but today she would finally witness the legendary changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked her blood sugar levels, a daily ritual she performed since her type 1 diabetes diagnosis at age 12. Aria tucked her emergency glucose tablets into her purse, alongside her meticulously organized notebook filled with historical facts about the royal guards. Growing up in a small town in Yorkshire, she dreamed of seeing these ceremonial guardians up close, their scarlet uniforms and bearskin caps representing centuries of unwavering dedication to duty. Her acceptance to King's College had brought her closer to this dream. But between classes and managing her health condition, she hadn't found the perfect moment until now. The date held special significance. It marked exactly 100 years since her great-grandfather had served as a royal guard. She'd grown up listening to family stories about his dedication, discipline, and the sacred protocols that governed every aspect of guard duty. Aria adjusted her glasses and smoothed down her favorite blue dress, chosen specifically for this occasion. The forecast predicted unusually warm weather for London, so she packed extra water bottles and snacks to help regulate her blood sugar. On her kitchen counter lay a printed schedule of the day's ceremonies, its edges worn from repeated reading. Aria had planned everything meticulously: arrival time, best viewing spots, and even calculated when she'd need her next insulin dose. Her professor had encouraged this visit, knowing it would bring her research paper about modern ceremonial military traditions to life. As she waited for her taxi, Aria checked her medical alert bracelet out of habit. The silver chain caught the morning light, reminding her of the balance she maintained daily between pursuing her passions and managing her health. Her mother had called last night, concerned about her attending alone, but Aria had assured her she could handle it. After all, she'd been independently managing her condition for years. The taxi horn sounded outside, and Aria gathered her belongings, heart racing with anticipation. The historic halls of Buckingham Palace awaited, along with the perfectly disciplined guard she'd studied so extensively. Little did she know that this day would become historic for reasons entirely different from what she'd planned, involving an unlikely hero in a moment that would challenge centuries of royal tradition. As she locked her apartment door, Aria couldn't have imagined that her visit would lead to changes in protocol that had remained untouched for generations, or that a chance encounter with a Hollywood star would transform not just her life, but the very institution she'd come to admire. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace swelled under the unusually warm London sun. Aria found her carefully researched viewing spot, positioning herself near the palace gates where the guards would march during their ceremonial change. She'd arrived early enough to secure a front row position, though the growing mass of tourists pressed closer with each passing minute. The weight of history surrounded her as she gazed at the palace's magnificent facade, her heart racing with anticipation. A few feet away, a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses stood quietly observing the scene. Most tourists were too focused on their phones or the palace to notice, but this was Keanu Reeves, who had finished filming a scene for his latest movie nearby. He'd slipped away from the set, drawn by curiosity about the famous ceremony he'd never witnessed despite his many visits to London. The actor maintained his low profile, happy to be just another face in the crowd. Aria felt the first wave of dizziness as the summer heat intensified. She reached into her bag for a water bottle, her hands trembling slightly as she unscrewed the cap. The morning's excitement had affected her blood sugar more than she'd anticipated, and the unexpected temperature wasn't helping. She fumbled for her glucose meter, trying to be discreet while checking her levels. The reading made her frown, lower than it should be, but not yet dangerous. She pulled out a glucose tablet, knowing she should eat something more substantial soon. The atmosphere crackled with excitement as the first drums echoed across the palace grounds. Tourists surged forward, cameras raised high, and Aria found herself squeezed tighter between eager onlookers. The pressure of bodies around her made it harder to reach her bag, now awkwardly pinned against her side. Her vision blurred slightly, but she forced herself to focus on the approaching guards, their scarlet uniforms glowing in the sunlight. Keanu noticed a young woman in the blue dress, swaying slightly. His years of working with stunt teams had trained him to spot signs of physical distress, and something about her movements caught his attention. He observed how she kept reaching for her bag, her movements becoming increasingly uncoordinated. The actor shifted position slightly, moving closer while maintaining his inconspicuous presence. The guards approached with mechanical precision, each step a testament to centuries of tradition. Aria tried to focus on their elaborate march, but the world began to tilt. The heat pressed down like a heavy blanket, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She needed sugar immediately, but her glucose tablets had slipped to the bottom of her bag. The crowd's excitement became a distant roar as her knees buckled. Time seemed to slow as Aria felt herself falling. She was barely conscious of the gasps from nearby tourists or the way the crowd instinctively stepped back, creating a small clearing around her. The nearest royal guard, positioned just feet away, remained perfectly still, years of training forcing him to maintain his post despite every human instinct screaming to help. His eyes, the only part of him allowed to move, registered the emergency unfolding before him. Keanu's reaction was instant. He pushed through the startled onlookers, reaching Aria just as she crumpled to the ground. His hat and sunglasses fell away as he knelt beside her, revealing his identity to the astonished crowd. The guard's peripheral vision caught the movement of the famous actor entering the prohibited space between civilian and sentry, an area that had remained sacrosanct for generations. The moment hung suspended between protocol and humanity. Phones emerged from the crowd, recording the scene as Keanu checked Aria's vital signs. Her medical alert bracelet caught his eye, and he quickly understood the situation. The guard stood rigid, a living statue trapped between duty and compassion, while the actor broke every rule in the royal handbook by remaining in the restricted space. Aria's consciousness flickered as she felt gentle hands supporting her head. Through the haze, she recognized a face above her, a face she'd seen countless times on movie screens. Confusion mingled with her physical distress as she tried to process the surreal turn of events. The last thing she'd expected when planning her visit was to have Keanu Reeves come to her rescue in front of Buckingham Palace's famous guards. The crowd's murmurs grew louder as more people recognized the actor. Palace security personnel began moving toward the scene, their own protocols unclear in this unprecedented situation. The royal guard remained motionless, but beneath his stoic exterior, his mind raced. In all his years of service, no situation had so thoroughly challenged the boundaries between ceremonial duty and basic human responsibility. Keanu's voice cut through the tension as he called out to the crowd, asking if anyone had medical training. His hand found Aria's medical alert bracelet, quickly understanding that her diabetes was causing this emergency. Without hesitation, he reached for her bag, knowing time was critical. The guard's eyes followed his movements, internal conflict visible only in the slight tension around them. The actor's calm efficiency contradicted his action hero image as he located Aria's glucose meter and tablets. Palace security approached cautiously, uncertain how to handle this unprecedented breach of protocol. Tourists continued recording as Keanu supported Aria's head, speaking to her in soft, reassuring tones while checking her vital signs with practiced movements that suggested past emergency training. Aria drifted in and out of consciousness, the world around her a blur of scarlet uniforms and concerned faces. She was vaguely aware of someone supporting her, a voice she somehow recognized guiding her through the crisis. The guard's polished boots remained in her peripheral vision, a stark reminder of the ceremonial world, colliding with urgent reality. Security personnel reached the scene, their own protocols clashing with the situation before them. The senior officer assessed the tableau, a world-famous actor kneeling in forbidden territory, an unconscious young woman, and a guard maintaining his post with rigid discipline. Years of training hadn't prepared any of them for this moment. The officer's hand hovered over his radio, knowing that whatever decision he made would have far-reaching consequences. Keanu looked up at the approaching security team, his voice carrying surprising authority. "She's diabetic and needs immediate medical attention. I'm not moving until help arrives." The statement wasn't a challenge, but a simple declaration of humanitarian priority. His steady gaze moved between the security officer and the guard, acknowledging the difficulty of their position while making it clear he wouldn't back down. The crowd had grown larger as word spread about the unfolding drama. Phones captured every moment as the actor continued caring for Aria, his presence creating a surreal scene against the palace's ceremonial backdrop. Some onlookers whispered about his famous kindness, while others debated the sacred protocols being broken. The guard remained frozen, but tiny beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, the only visible sign of his internal struggle. Aria's eyes fluttered open as the glucose began taking effect. Her vision cleared enough to confirm what she thought she'd imagined. Keanu Reeves was indeed kneeling beside her, one hand supporting her head while the other checked her pulse. The reality of her situation slowly dawned on her. She had collapsed during the ceremony she dreamed of seeing, and now a Hollywood star was helping her in full view of the royal guard. Palace medical staff arrived with a wheelchair, having been summoned by security. They moved toward Aria but hesitated at the boundary line, their training warring with the urgent need to reach their patient. Keanu looked at them, then at the guard, his expression making it clear that traditional boundaries couldn't stand in the way of medical care. The senior security officer made a quick decision, nodding to the medical team to proceed. As the medical staff crossed the sacred line, a subtle shift occurred. The guard's eyes moved slightly, meeting Keanu's gaze for a fraction of a second. In that brief moment, an understanding passed between them. Some protocols, no matter how ancient or respected, must yield to human necessity. The actor acknowledged this silent communication with a small nod, recognizing the guard's impossible position. The palace grounds had grown eerily quiet, the usual tourist chatter replaced by tense anticipation. Security personnel formed a protective barrier around the scene, but they couldn't stop the dozens of phone cameras capturing this extraordinary moment. Social media was already buzzing with clips of Keanu Reeves defying royal protocol to help a stranger, the kind of real-life drama that captures global attention. Aria tried to sit up, embarrassment flooding her cheeks as she realized she was the center of this unprecedented situation. Keanu gently supported her while the medical team checked her vital signs, his presence somehow both remarkable and comforting. The guard shadow fell across them, a reminder of the ceremonial world that had been disrupted by this very human emergency. The palace medical team worked efficiently around Keanu, who maintained a supportive position beside Aria. Their examination confirmed what the actor had already assessed. Her blood sugar had dropped dangerously low, but the glucose tablets had started to take effect. The senior medic quietly commended Keanu's quick response, noting that his intervention had prevented a more serious medical emergency. Palace officials gathered at the periphery of the scene, engaged in urgent whispered conversations. The unprecedented situation had triggered a cascade of protocol violations, yet the presence of a globally respected celebrity and the clear medical necessity created a unique diplomatic challenge. Inside the palace, phones rang as news of the incident reached higher authorities. Aria's color gradually improved as her blood sugar stabilized. She found herself in the surreal position of having a Hollywood star help her into the wheelchair, while one of the famous royal guards stood just feet away, maintaining his ceremonial pose despite the chaos around him. The gravity of what had happened began to sink in. She had inadvertently become the catalyst for a moment that challenged centuries of tradition. Keanu stayed close as the medical team prepared to move Aria to the palace's first aid station. His actions had transcended mere celebrity intervention. They'd highlighted a crucial gap in protocols that prioritized ceremony over emergency response. The senior security officer approached, speaking in low tones about the need to restore ceremonial order, but the actor's gentle resistance made it clear he wouldn't leave until he knew Aria was properly cared for. The guard, still maintaining his post, experienced perhaps the most complex moments of his service. His training demanded absolute stillness, yet every human instinct had urged him to help. Through his peripheral vision, he watched the scene unfold, knowing that his unwavering stance would be scrutinized alongside Keanu's intervention. The contrast between duty and compassion had never been starker. Inside the palace, emergency meetings convened as officials grappled with the public relations implications. Video clips of the incident were already trending on social media, drawing millions of views and sparking debates about tradition versus human responsibility. The palace's rigid protocols, unchanged for generations, faced unprecedented public scrutiny. Aria found her voice as her condition stabilized, managing to thank Keanu through her lingering embarrassment. The actor's response was characteristically humble as he helped adjust her wheelchair. "Anyone would have done the same," he said quietly, though they both knew that wasn't true. No one else had dared to cross that ceremonial line. The medical team began moving Aria toward the palace's first aid station, but not before she caught a final glimpse of the guard. Despite his rigid posture, she noticed something in his eyes, a glimmer of relief, perhaps, or acknowledgement of the extraordinary scene he'd witnessed. Keanu walked alongside the wheelchair until they reached the palace entrance, where security protocols finally demanded he step back. As Aria disappeared into the palace, media crews began arriving, drawn by social media reports of the incident. Palace officials moved quickly to manage the situation, but the story had already taken on a life of its own. The image of Keanu Reeves breaking royal protocol to help a stranger resonated deeply with the public, challenging the balance between tradition and compassion. The guard maintained his post as normalcy slowly returned to the palace grounds, but something had fundamentally shifted. His unwavering stance, once a symbol of unyielding tradition, now carried a different weight. The public's attention had turned to the human cost of such rigid protocols, sparking conversations about necessary change. Inside the first aid station, Aria received thorough medical attention while palace officials debriefed her about the incident. She learned that her collapse had inadvertently exposed a significant gap in emergency response procedures around ceremonial guards. The palace's chief of security admitted that while protocols existed for major security threats, the handling of medical emergencies in ceremonial spaces had never been properly addressed. The palace first aid station buzzed with activity as medical staff monitored Aria's recovery. Her blood sugar levels had stabilized, but the impact of her experience resonated far beyond her personal health crisis. Palace officials moved between rooms, phones pressed to their ears, managing the growing media interest in the incident. The story had gone viral, with millions sharing videos of Keanu's intervention. Outside, the actor had quietly slipped away from the gathering media crews, true to his reputation for avoiding publicity. Before leaving, he'd asked palace staff to pass along his contact information to Aria, offering support if she needed it. His final words to the security team were simple but profound. Sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when to break the rules. The royal guard was relieved from his post an hour later, his replacement taking over with the same ceremonial precision that had governed the position for centuries. In a private debriefing, he struggled to put into words the complexity of what he'd witnessed. His training had prepared him for countless scenarios, but nothing had equipped him for watching a medical emergency unfold while protocol demanded his inaction. Aria's parents arrived at the palace, having been contacted by officials. Their initial panic turned to amazement as they learned the full story of their daughter's experience. The palace staff treated them with extraordinary courtesy, aware that the incident had sparked crucial discussions about ceremonial protocols and human safety. Within hours, the palace released an official statement acknowledging the incident and announcing an immediate review of emergency response procedures around ceremonial guards. The carefully worded message praised both Keanu Reeves' humanitarian intervention and the guards' dedication to duty, while recognizing the need for protocol modifications that balance tradition with public safety. Aria's story reached far beyond the palace gates. Medical organizations praised the spotlight on diabetes awareness, while military experts began discussions about modernizing ceremonial protocols. The guard who had maintained his post received letters from around the world, many from fellow service members sharing their own struggles with rigid protocols in human emergencies. 2 days later, Aria returned to the palace at the official invitation of the royal household. The same guard was present, but this time protocol allowed him to break position and speak with her. Their conversation was brief but meaningful, both acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances that had connected them. The guard admitted that her collapse had forced everyone to confront the human cost of unwavering tradition. The palace announced new emergency protocols the following week. Ceremonial guards would now be permitted to break position for medical emergencies, with clear guidelines about appropriate responses. The changes maintained the dignity of ceremonial duties, while acknowledging the paramount importance of human life. Aria's incident had catalyzed a transformation centuries in the making. Keanu's role in the incident added another chapter to his legacy of random acts of kindness, though he declined all requests for interviews about the event. His quiet intervention had demonstrated that true respect for tradition sometimes meant having the courage to challenge it. Palace officials privately acknowledged that his celebrity status had helped smooth the path for necessary changes that might otherwise have taken years to implement. Aria returned to her studies at King's College, but her experience had shifted her academic focus. Her research now explored the evolution of ceremonial traditions, particularly how they adapted to modern humanitarian values. Her professor encouraged this new direction, recognizing that she had unique insight into a significant moment of institutional change. The guard received a special commendation from the palace, not for maintaining his post, but for being part of a moment that helped the institution grow. His stoic presence during the incident, contrasted with Keanu's intervention, had perfectly illustrated the need for balance between tradition and compassion. In his private life, he began speaking to military groups about the importance of adaptable protocols in a changing world. 6 months after the incident, Buckingham Palace stood transformed, not in its majestic appearance, but in its approach to ceremonial tradition. The new emergency protocols had been successfully implemented across all royal residences, creating a model that other ceremonial guards worldwide began to study and adapt. Aria's experience had sparked a quiet revolution in how historical institutions balance tradition with human needs. Aria received an unexpected package at her apartment, a handwritten note from Keanu Reeves accompanying a comprehensive first aid kit. His message was characteristically modest: stay safe. Sometimes the best moments in life come from the unexpected. She displayed the note alongside her father's old photographs of his military service, a reminder that tradition and progress could coexist. The royal guard who had stood watch that day found himself teaching new recruits about the modified protocols. His experience became a cornerstone of training, demonstrating how unwavering dedication to duty could accommodate human compassion. The videos of that day, showing his stillness contrasted with Keanu's intervention, became a powerful teaching tool about judgment and adaptation in ceremonial roles. Public perception of the royal guard shifted subtly but significantly. Tourists still flocked to photograph their famous stoic expressions, but now they also shared stories of guards responding to emergencies while maintaining the dignity of their position. The change protocols hadn't diminished the ceremony's grandeur. Instead, they'd added a layer of humanity that resonated deeply with visitors. Aria completed her thesis on the evolution of ceremonial traditions in modern society, earning highest honors. Her personal experience had enriched her academic work with unique insights into how centuries-old institutions could adapt without losing their essential character. She began receiving speaking invitations from historical organizations interested in modernizing their approach to ceremonial traditions. The incident's ripple effects reached far beyond palace walls. Other ceremonial units worldwide began reviewing their own protocols, recognizing that tradition shouldn't come at the cost of human safety. Aria's story became a reference point in discussions about institutional change, proving that sometimes it took an unexpected crisis to illuminate the path forward. A year after her collapse, Aria returned to Buckingham Palace as a consultant, helping refine emergency response procedures around ceremonial spaces. The same guard who had stood watch during her medical emergency now worked with her, their unique shared experience bridging the gap between tradition and necessary change. Together, they helped create guidelines that would protect both the dignity of ceremony and the safety of the public. Keanu's intervention had added another chapter to the palace's rich history, proving that sometimes the most meaningful changes came from unexpected sources. His simple act of human kindness had accomplished what years of internal discussion couldn't, demonstrating that compassion and ceremony could coexist. The palace quietly added a plaque in the guardhouse, reminding future generations that tradition was strongest when it embraced humanity. The story became a symbol of positive institutional change, showing how even the most rigid traditions could evolve without losing their essence. Aria's experience had transformed not just protocols but perspectives, reminding everyone that behind every ceremony and tradition stood real people with real needs. Her fateful encounter with Keanu Reeves had proved that sometimes it took an outsider to illuminate the path to necessary change, and that true respect for tradition meant having the courage to help it grow.